We're talking today with Bob Layton of University Heights, Ohio. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Bob, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Madison, Indiana, on August 24th, 1946.
Okay. Did you grow up there, or did you move around?
Lived there till, I think, 12 years old. My father worked for a government facility there at Jefferson Proving Ground. He was laid off in 1957. We moved to Ohio. He worked in Dayton, Ohio. I grew up in a small town west of Dayton, Ohio. Eaton, Ohio, a town of 5,000 people.
Okay. And did you finish high school there?
Graduated high school in 1964, yes.
Okay. And what did you do after you finished high school?
Well, my freshman year, in fact, freshman year of college, I spent at the University of Arizona, where I thought I was going to be an architect, but they quickly disabused me of that notion. And I didn't see any sense in staying in Arizona paying out-of-state tuition, so I transferred to Ohio University.
Okay. All right. And then, was that a school that had a required ROTC program in it?
It did not. It did not. Interestingly, I think the reason I ended up in ROTC was the University of Arizona, which did require ROTC. And so in the fall of, fall of 66, I entered Ohio University. I was reading about this thing called Vietnam, and I just had the sense that another 2 or 3 years it might still be happening, and if I was going to go in the service, I might as well go in as an officer rather than wait to be drafted. So had I gone to Ohio University as a freshman, I'm guessing I would not have gone into ROTC.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that I went to Arizona made a change in my life in that regard.
Okay. Now, what did ROTC training actually consist of in those days?
Oh God, what do I remember? It was obviously it was a lot of classroom work, military histories and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. There was drill once a week. There was a 6 or 8 week sort of basic training between junior and senior years, and that was as much as I remember of it.
Okay. Now, what did they do for the basic training? Did you actually go to a basic training base, or did they just...
Yeah, I went to a place called Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, which I think was an old World War II camp, really. And I think it was later on in my life, I commanded a basic training company for a while, and comparing the two, it was kind of a basic training. But again, there was emphasis there on leadership skills. So each day, a new cadet was the acting platoon leader, or be an acting squad leader, something like that. So we were moved in and out of leadership positions and graded on those days when we were in leadership positions. Okay. And it was marksmanship. I guess the major thing I remember is the marksmanship training. The 82nd Airborne were the cadre for that, and a lot of them had either served in Vietnam already or had been in the Caribbean. Remember the 82nd had a little excursion down into
Dominican
Republic. Yeah. So you saw these track troopers with their airborne wings and the CIB above it. Good looking troops.
Okay. Was there much of an anti-war movement going on at Ohio U in those days?
Of course there was. Yeah, of course there was. Ohio U is a pretty liberal school. I don't think it was beyond the average, but I mean, there was a strong anti-war movement and teach-ins and that sort of thing. And I remember Dean Rusk coming to speak on campus, and a huge walkout was staged, that sort of thing.
Okay. Now, how did any of that kind of touch on you as an ROTC cadet? I mean, did people treat you differently, or did you just feel a little bit outside of things?
I don't think. I mean, within my circle of friends, no.
Okay.
And my circle of friends included some anti-war people. And, a friend of mine became a conscientious objector. But that's what a university is supposed to be, a place where you have divergent views and divergent interests in people, and you mix together. and try to coexist with that.
Sure.
You know, if I get political as opposed to what we have today, where it seems to be one side of the fence or the other, and nothing in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have any trouble in that regard being
Okay.
ROTC.
All right. Now, when did you graduate from college?
March 1969.
Okay, so you were in school then during 1968, would summer of '68 be when you had your summer training?
Actually, I had mine in 67.
Okay, all right, but you're in school in '68. So what went on your campus in '68? Because you had various assassinations and all that kind of thing.
I think the assassination of King and then the assassination of Kennedy had profound impact on the campus at Ohio University. I don't recall classes being canceled or anything, but I know that there were there were just gatherings and activities and I mean, and rightly so, rightly so. I mean, that was also, I remember watching Johnson's address to the nation when he said, I will not run again. I mean, there was a lot of activity, a lot of political activity going on at that time. And it was impossible to ignore it.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now you get into '69, now you graduate, and so now it's time for you to report for duty.
Right.
So what happens next? You graduate from school, now what?
I graduated, I received a commission and orders at the same time. And 2 weeks later, I reported to Fort Benning, Georgia for the infantry officers basic course.
Okay. And what does that consist of?
Well, first let me note a little historical note. When I reported to Fort Benning on the appointed day, the guards at the gate told me that the post was closed for the day and you can come back tomorrow. I immediately assumed North Vietnam had surrendered because they knew I was on the way, right? But it turned out, interestingly enough, my first day in the Army was the official day of mourning for Dwight Eisenhower, who had died just a few days previously. So in fact, literally my first day in the Army, I was sent home. But the next day, the war continued. So the infantry officer basic course, again, a lot of leadership skills, a lot of tactics, a lot of map reading, compass, land navigation, familiarization with a lot of different weapon systems, probably classes on such things as logistics, military law, stuff like that, which I've long since forgotten. But it was, and really it was, for me, it was the transition, again, from a fairly liberal campus to suddenly now we are in the Army full time, and there's no doubt, what's ahead of me, and so it was. There was a mind change going on there also, getting geared up for what was going to be going on. That was just what I was going through personally, getting geared up for the fact we are in the Army and we are headed for Vietnam.
Okay. Now, is this where really sort of the heavy-duty discipline sets in as opposed to ROTC, or had you learned the way the Army did things already?
Not totally. Not totally. There was, but yeah, I mean, it was training, but it was not training in the sense of, it was called infantry officer basic course, but it was not a basic training in the sense, we were officers, so, we were treated with a certain amount of respect that, say, the OCS candidates didn't have. We'd have classes in what was called Building 4, affectionately known as Bedroom 4, and during the breaks, the officers would go out and get a cup of coffee. And where we're getting our coffee, we'd see the OCS candidates braced against the wall. That was their break. So, as an officer, we didn't have the discipline those guys went through.
Okay.
At all.
All right. Now, how long did you spend in the basic course?
I think it was 9 weeks.
Okay. And what do they do with you once you're through with that?
Well, while I was there, I volunteered for jump school and ranger training.
Okay.
So, So I graduated from the basic course, and I think I had a couple weeks of downtime, and then went to jump school, which was 3 weeks.
Was that at Fort Benning or?
At Fort Benning, yeah.
All right.
And
All right. Now, I mean, parachuting was kind of going out of vogue at that point. I mean, I guess you did. I guess Rangers still did it.
I think the Army always wanted it. Yeah, it was out of. Certainly, we did not have airborne units jumping in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the Army, though, I don't think it'll ever go out of vogue because it's sort of a confidence building thing, and it sort of shows that, you know, here's a guy that's a hard charger.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think my personal belief is the Army probably always will have a parachute units because
Mm-hmm.
they want that kind of personality. And for me, it was I loved it. I mean, it was fun. It really was.
All right. So how do they work you up to jumping out of an airplane?
I think the cadre at jump school were the best psychiatrists or psychologists in the world because they spent 2 weeks. First of all, there was 2 weeks of intense training, but it was 2 weeks of very purposeful training. There was no harassment for the sake of harassment because in the third week you're going to be 1,200 feet above the ground jumping out of an airplane. So there was no screwing around with you just to do that. Everything was for a purpose, and if you were not paying attention, they were on you right away, because you know there's no fooling around here. And they were great at just building your confidence and building your desire. I mean, by the time I got in the airplane to jump, literally I would have pushed my mother all the way to get out the door. I wanted to jump, and I don't think I was alone in that. They fire you up to go, and they're very good at it. And I enjoyed it though. I did not find jump school to be that difficult physically, and I did enjoy jumping.
Okay, so that's sort of like 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Now Ranger School comes after that. That's a little bit different.
Ranger school as hell. Yeah, I had another couple of 3 weeks off, whatever, and then I went through Ranger Class 70-2, fiscal year 1970, which I think we started in September '69.
Mm-hmm.
Ranger training was the best thing I ever did. It wasn't by any means fun, but it was the best thing I ever did because of the training that we received from Ranger School. It is fully geared to prepare small unit combat leaders, and that's all you do for 9 weeks. And there is harassment there, and it's purposeful. There's harassment in the sense that when you're in the field training, you get one meal, 1 C ration a day, and your day goes anywhere from 18 to 19, 20 hours, and that will continue for 2-3 weeks sometimes. And the idea is just to put you under pressure, to see how you react under pressure. As they would say, they can't shoot at you, so the best thing they can do to find out what you're made of is just not feed you and not let you have sleep, and see how you deal with tension, how you deal with stress. Can you function? And it was constantly patrolling, constantly out in the field, map and compass, and so you learn to navigate over land, which is something that came in very handy in Vietnam. And you learn that you have a lot more in you than you would have ever thought. You know, at the point when you think you want to quit, no, you've got another 3 days in you easily. You don't know that, but they'll get it out of you. And it was absolutely the best training in the world. And frankly, I knew officers who did not go to Ranger School, and I never understood why they didn't, because I would have felt. I did not think that the infantry officer basic course, while on paper graduating from that qualified me to lead a platoon in Vietnam. I didn't think so. Okay, I felt that I needed everything I could get, and I wanted that Ranger training.
Okay. Now, what kind of terrain were you in for the Ranger training?
There were 3 phases when I went through. Where there was a phase at Fort Benning, Georgia, Camp Darby, where we did a lot of the preliminary. We did a lot of PT in Darby. There was a lot of every morning was an obstacle course through where we had a low crawl through freshly watered down Georgia clay, which is just as slick as oil. And after that, when you got enough of the stuff on your hands, then you start doing the overhead ladders, and you can't hang on to them, right? And then you fall into the water, and then you keep going. And we had I guess they're called the orienteering courses, where you start out with a map and a compass, and you have to find that stake in the woods 3,000 meters that way, and then there would be instructions to say, go find this other thing. So we had the land navigation courses, and you did that with your Ranger buddy at night, which was an interesting course. And there were other classes at Camp Darby. We were pulled together one time administratively because of some order that was issued, some very high level of command that was supposed to go to all of the officers in the Army, and so it even broke us out. I think it was the only break we had from Ranger training where we actually were not just hard charging ahead. And I remember, well, I'll tell you, my Ranger school started maybe 3 or 4 days after Armstrong landed on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember watching the moon landing in my motel room. And when we had this get together for this Army, whatever this order thing was for all the officers, we got our update on what was going on with the guys coming back from the moon. I remember that too. So Camp Darby was really a lot of almost the preliminary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Dahlonega, Georgia, northern Georgia, for a lot of, we did mountaineering there, rappelling, that sort of stuff. And a lot of patrolling, just patrol through northern Georgia, up the hills, down the hills, along the ridge lines. And we completed that. You come back to Fort Benning, you get about an 8-hour break, and then we went down to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida for the jungle phase of Ranger School. And again, more patrols. We did a riverine assault, I think they called it, where we actually were loaded onto Navy landing craft and did an assault onto the beaches. And then one day we were called together, and they started calling out names. And if your name was called, it turned out that you went over there, it turned out you didn't pass.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys had just gone through the 9 weeks of hell, and they didn't have the grades to get the Ranger tab, and they found out on the next to the last day they didn't graduate from Ranger School, which just one of the toughest cuts you ever see in your life. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us then had one more day of Ranger School, and it was all what they called administrative. There was no patrolling for grades anymore. And so we were getting ready to go back out, and I was a cigarette smoker at the time, and I was out of smokes, and my Ranger buddy, you go through Ranger School with a Ranger buddy, the two of you are supposed to be closer than husband and wife for that 9-week period. You each depend on the other, keep you going. And I was out of cigarettes, and I saw Joe throwing a couple of packs of cigarettes in his rucksack. And I said, Joe, I'm out of cigarettes, let me have a pack, let me get through this. And he says, no, he said, I'm going to need these. And I said, Joe, we only got one more day. What's this all about? He said, they're lying to us, Bob, they're not going to let us out of here. So I think I finally got a couple of smokes from him, but I remember they're lying to us.
All right, but I take it in the end they were not lying to you.
They didn't know we graduated the next day. They brought us in, we had a graduation ceremony on a somewhat abandoned runway out in Layton Air Force Base. They came by with a safety pin and ranger tab and put it on your shoulder, and then we had like this picnic, barbecue, all the kind of stuff, beer, and we spent the night at on that airstrip in those little Quonset huts. And I remember, I don't know, it's maybe 3 or 4 in the afternoon, whatever. The sun is kind of starting to set, and I remember walking into this Quonset hut, and you see the sun filtering through the windows, and you see the dust flooding. You know what I'm talking about? And we're all so exhausted that literally you hit that bunk and you're asleep in no time. And I would see guys, and it was almost like walking into a morgue, because guys had gone in, fallen asleep before I got there, and they just, how were they hit? That's how they lay. It was an eerie feeling, and 5 seconds later I was one of them, So we spent the night then at Eglin, and then the next day they took us back to Fort Benning. We processed out, but we had to spend the second night at Fort Benning. And one of the things that we were told was that literally they wanted us to get 2 good nights of sleep before we left the post, because they didn't want us driving down the road and falling asleep, killing ourselves or someone. So the second night at Fort Benning, I had some leave. I went home, and then I was assigned. My assignment was Fort Leonard, Missouri. I went out there and got there, I guess, in October of 1969, and I was assigned as a training officer for a basic training company, and maybe 3 weeks after I was there, the company commander, who was a first lieutenant, his tour was up. He was out of the Army, and they had no officers. And so, as a second lieutenant, I became the commanding officer of Echo Company, 5th Battalion, 3rd Training Brigade. And I was the smartest company commander on the post, because when they said I was in command, I got the drill sergeants together, and I said, you guys know what you're doing. You've been doing it for a long time. Keep doing it, and I will stay out of your way. And that made all the sense in the world to me, and so that's what I did for the next, I guess, until the end of January 1970, when I left there and had my orders in Vietnam.
All right. And so now do they give you another leave, or because?
Yeah, I had 30 days leave.
Okay.
Before going to Vietnam.
And then when they send you to Vietnam, how do they get you to Vietnam?
Via Panama. I went to, I was assigned to the General Operations School down in, was it Fort Howard, I think, in Panama, which was kind of nice, because first of all, Fort Leonard Wood in the winter was called Little Korea, and with reason. And I really think, after Ranger School, there was nothing I really learned in jungle ops.
Yeah.
But I really think it might have been just acclimation. But I got there and I found maybe 10 or 12 guys that I'd gone through jump school and Ranger School with. And so we kind of partied it up for 2 weeks in Panama, and drank every night, and got up the next morning and went through the training, and then drank again every night. We weren't the most serious students at the time, I must admit, but again, there was nothing new for us to learn down there, and so, but it was good to see those guys again. Right. So I went there 2 weeks, then to Travis Air Base in San Francisco, and then to Vietnam.
Okay. And did they put you on a military aircraft or charter?
American Airlines.
Okay. All right. Remember where you stopped on the way over?
Hawaii.
Okay. And did you get off?
Go surfing? No.
Yeah.
We got up. Well, they refueled us. We got off the plane. I think technically I could say I've been in Hawaii, but I didn't touch the ground. I think I was just standing on the tarmac or somewhere where they refueled.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then where do you land in Vietnam?
Tan Son Nhut.
Okay. And what's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
My first impression was when the door opened and I saw these guys behind a wall. They're screaming and yelling because the bird I took in was the bird they were going to take out.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very, very happy to see their freedom bird. I think to me there was getting off that plane, there was a reality that sets in because there's no way out of this now until the end of your tour, you know, and there's no dodging what's going to be coming next. So there was there was just a harsh reality that, okay, you know, you're here now, you know, and all the games are over.
Okay, so when did you actually arrive in Vietnam?
It was the end of March. I'm not sure the exact the day. I think it was the end of March, 1970.
All right. Now, did you have orders for a unit yet, or were you going to go find them?
No, we were given three options, or three choices. None, of course, this being the Army, none guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, being a mercenary at heart, I guess my first choice was 173rd Airborne Brigade because it was joint jumping status.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to be there, at least get the extra money. My second choice was 101st Airborne Division. My third choice was the CAV, and I went to the 101st.
All right. And how long did it take to sort that out?
I think just a day or two.
Okay. All right. Now, where was the 101st at that time?
North I-Corps.
Okay.
I flew into Fubai.
Did they still have a base back at Benoit to go through, or did you just go up to Fubai?
The 101st, no, I went straight to Fubai.
Okay. And once you got there, did they give you any kind of orientation before putting you in
Yeah,
the
there was,
field?
I think it was 4 or 5 days, something like that. It was called Screaming Eagle Replacement Training, CERTs.
Yeah.
And that was, I really don't remember a whole lot about the actual training we had there. I remember a conversation I had with a chopper pilot when I was going through CERTs, and again, you know, he probably sensed that here's a lieutenant that's a little shaky on his feet. This guy was coming back for his second tour. He was a Huey pilot, and I remember we had a conversation one day, and it was a really good conversation, very reassuring. Because he told me, he said, I don't think you can get yourself into a situation. He says, as long as we have communication back and forth, I don't think you can get yourself in a situation where we can't work something out for you. And I remember, that's probably the major thing I remember from CERTs is just, you know, you just sort of get a feeling of confidence again that, you know, okay, this is doable. You know, other people have done it. It was just a very reassuring conversation I remember having with this guy. I don't remember his name or anything, but it was a good conversation. It helped me.
Okay. All right, you go through that. Now, what unit are you assigned to?
Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 501st Infantry.
All right. And where were they at the time you joined them?
They were maybe a mile south of a firebase called Ripcord.
Mm-hmm. All
A
right.
place we called Re-Up Hill. Because it was a very active area, and a lot of people were re-enlisting. I shouldn't say a lot. There were people who were re-enlisting to get out of the field because it was a very hot area, and there was a section called Re-Up Hill that had been a source of contention, let us say, once or twice between the U.S. and the North Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so how do they get you out to the unit?
Chopper.
Okay. Do you remember anything about that particular ride?
No, I remember I flew out with a lieutenant colonel, and I don't know who it was. I went to a fire base. I don't know if it was Ripcord or not. I was there for just a few minutes, and then there was another chopper that took me out to where Bravo Company was. I landed, introduced myself to the company commander. My platoon sergeant came over with the squad leaders and met them. I remember one of the guys in my platoon saying that they'd been waiting, that they'd killed a trail watcher. He was over by the side of the LZ, and he asked me if I wanted to go see him. And I remember just declining because I remember just thinking to myself, well, there'll probably be a few more of these in the future, so I'll just wait until it happens. But that's, you know, so I was on the ground. Yeah.
All right. Now, was the man you're replacing, was he still there, or?
No, he was now the company executive officer.
Okay. And so was he back in the
He was
base
back in
camp then?
Dubai.
Okay.
I met him in the course of country, yes.
All right. And who was your company commander?
A fellow named Robert Stanton.
Okay. And were you with him long, or did he rotate out?
For about 3 months, 4 months.
All right. And I guess what did you do? You joined your company, your platoon, basically. What did you do, or how did you approach them when you joined them?
Well, I joined the company. It was probably mid to late afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting ready to leave the LZ. My first conversations were with the 3 squad leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I simply introduced myself to them, told them who I was. And when I was at Fort Leonard, I'd had some bad experiences with NCOs. And so I told these guys that the only thing I expected of them really was to be truthful with me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had some bad experiences with NCOs at Fort Leonard, lying to me, and bad things happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, I'm not here to make a career off your back or anything like that. But you know, we just have to be truthful with one another, and we'll start everything from there.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first relationship with those guys.
All right. And so now you head off the fire base. You go out and set up
Oh,
the
the
night
landing
position?
zone.
Yeah. Well, that's an LZ, not a fire base.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you make a night
set
position somewhere.
We set up. We had, when I landed, it was the whole company was there. My platoon and the company CP command post moved off the landing zone in one direction. Second and third platoons went another direction. We set up a night position, and the commanding officer told me that I needed to send a squad back down the trail. We'd moved on to set up a night ambush position, and the platoon sergeant told me that this duty rotated among the 3 squads, and it was the first squad was up for, I think it was the first squad.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I think it was, but the squad was up to go out, and they went out. We set up the rest of us set up the NDP, and the next morning that squad was hit and was wiped out. 4 of them were killed outright, and the rest were wounded. And that was my first morning in the field.
Okay.
In Vietnam.
All right. Now, did you get the wounded men out alive, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One of them, I didn't know it at the time. One of them was a paraplegic. He came back to his home in Cincinnati, Ohio. My home is a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. And he died in the mid-'80s. And his family was able to they got his death was attributed to Vietnam, to
Right.
that he suffered in Vietnam. And so, and I think it was 1990, I opened the Cleveland paper and I read this story about a guy from Cincinnati whose name had been added to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about the fact that he'd been with the 101st Airborne Division and a squad that was ambushed in April 1970. And I thought he had to be mine. He had to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't know it. I didn't know any of them.
Right.
I clipped that article and kept it, and when I went 2003, I went to a reunion, my first reunion of Bravo Company, and my platoon medic was there, and I showed it to him. He said, "Yeah, that was your guy. That was us, one of ours." And you know, while I know that's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess, I think I wish to hell I'd known he was there. I could have gone to see him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I don't know, maybe he would have said, "Screw you, you got me fired up, get on my house," or maybe I don't know, but I certainly would have gone down to see him. But yeah, so we got the wounded out.
So how many men were in your platoon?
Each squad was probably about 5-6 people. I had 3 squads, so after that first day, I never got that squad back. I went through 7 months of Vietnam as a platoon leader, basically leading a reinforced squad.
Yeah.
12, 14 men.
Wow.
I never got that squad back.
So you're not taking very many replacements at that point?
We were not. I left the platoon in October, and the last operation I went out on, somewhere the floodgates opened, because I remember my last operation, my platoon size must have doubled. And it's, I mean, when you're that small, you're very, very quiet. You become a very cohesive unit, and suddenly we're twice as big, and it sounded like a circus going through the jungle as far as I was concerned. I couldn't believe the noise. But yeah, we didn't get any replacements all through from April through the end of September. Maybe 1 or 2, but you know, nothing. I never got that squad back. I had 2 squads.
All right. Now, was the rest of the company in similar shape, or do they have at least a little bit bigger platoons?
They had bigger platoons, but they weren't getting replacements that much either. Yeah.
All right. So that's sort of your welcome to life in the field at that point. So that's March or thereabouts, 1970.
1st of April.
1st of April. Okay. And by this time, they're trying to establish. I mean, Ripcord doesn't get established on a regular basis for another week or so after that. And then there is a base there, and your battalion is kind of in and out of that general area. So, kind of take us through now the next couple of months. What's going on? What are you seeing?
I think we left the Ripcord area for a while and then came back.
Yeah.
But when we were in Ripcord, it was just a constant skirmishing, not on a daily basis, but 2 or 3 contacts a week, where a trail watcher or someone who would have contact with, a quick contact with. I lost 8 guys total over there. The 5th guy was probably 2 weeks after that first squad was ambushed. Cut this one out, right? We were moving along a trail, and came on an LZ, and it turns out there was a trail watcher on the other side there. This is by example. We start to move across, and he opens up on us. You know, that's the sort of thing that would happen. And I lost a guy there. It was just pretty constant skirmishing. Often nothing, no major pitched battles, but just constantly bumping heads with the MVA all around that Ripcord area. I don't think we were alone in that. I think a lot of units had the same experiences, because they were patrolling heavily too. I think they were trying to figure out how many of us were out there, just as much as we were trying to figure out how many of them were out there.
Okay. Now, in these months, sort of kind of April, May, June. Is your platoon normally by itself, or are you more commonly?
For the most part, yes, we were, yeah. Yeah. I don't think we had that many company-size operations at that time. And again, when you have 12 or 14 people, it makes you, you become very cohesive. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't recommend going to war with 12 or 14 people, but if you do it, you quickly find out how tight you can be.
Now, how long would they keep you out in the field?
God, weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while you get fresh uniforms, you know. But you just, you don't go back and sleep at night. You don't go back for shower at night. You don't get warm breakfast in the morning. It's just those operations were anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And did you have kind of a standard operating procedure if you're moving from one area to another? What do you do or not do?
Well, you start each day with a stand down, early in the morning, and that can go for 20 minutes, whatever it takes. What you're looking for, you want the first light to pass,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't get hit at first light. So you start with a stand down at first light. You'll end the day with a stand down at last light. And in between those two things that you always do, there was no pattern, because I didn't want a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Some days after first light, we'd eat. Some days after first light, we're moving. I don't ever want to get caught in a routine, because someone might pick up on my routine and do us harm. Sometimes at night you move into an NDP at 6 o'clock at night and you eat and you stay there tonight. Other nights you move in, you'll sit down, you'll eat at 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and maybe 10, 15 minutes before last light you move to another position for your night NDP. You never want to set a pattern. So when you ask me what went on, there is no pattern. But you just don't want to, and you don't want to stay in one place too long.
Mm-hmm.
Other than obviously at night you're going to stay there, but you'd hear about, I don't know if it happened or not, because I wasn't with those platoons, but you would hear about officers who would call in fake positions and would stay in one spot
Mm-hmm.
because they thought that was safe. Well, I think that was the most dangerous thing in the world you could do. And there was no way in hell I would have ever done that to my men. You always assume the worst, and that's how you operate.
Okay. Would you move on trails or off them?
Both. But many times on the ridgeline, there's only one way to go, and that is a trail.
Mm-hmm.
But there were times when I would take my platoon off the ridgeline down along the side and move through an area. Yeah. Sometimes if you do that, you want to keep at least one guy or two on the top as almost a flank position. But yeah, actually there were times when I'd move on the side of a hill.
And did you have rules about day and night of noise discipline, light discipline, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Basically, I think the noise that used to grate on me the most was a Zippo lighter closing. Because it is so foreign to the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want any noise that's foreign to the jungle. I had guys at one time had a fucking radio, and that's what it was. Well, he didn't have it long. I mean, you play a radio on the middle of the jungle, my platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you? Yeah. So smoking at night, I will admit to you that we did some of that. You're not supposed to, but we did some of that. But you'll get a poncho over your head, like something like that, to light the cigarette or whatever. Right? No, not too much of that.
Okay.
But every once in a while, you just.
All right. And how do you get your food, fresh water, that kind of thing?
Well, mostly helicopter resupply. If we found streams, we obviously used them. but most of our waters, and obviously the food came in every 4 days on longbirds.
Okay.
And they were their own problem, because that's when you were exposed.
Mhm.
Everyone in the universe knew where you were, because the chopper was there. And now, so again, you got a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid. I was the old guy. I was 24 years old, right? You got a 19, 20-year-old kid, and he's got a letter from home. What's he want to do with it? He wants to read it. What do I want to do? I want to get his ass moving out of this LZ where everyone in the world knows where we are, and we'll stop 10 minutes down the road, 15 minutes down the road, whatever. Read it then, you know. It's a matter of trying to. What's controlled paranoia? I think that's what it is. Okay, you just you don't relax. You don't relax, and honestly, if I couldn't see behind the tree, my assumption was always there's something bad behind the tree, and that's kind of what you do.
All right. Now, did you have kind of the sort of same core group of guys then for the next several months?
Yeah, kind of in a way, yeah.
Or you maybe get one guy out and one guy in once in a while?
Get one, I'm sorry?
One guy out and one guy in, so you stay at about the same level. Did you get any?
Yeah. In terms of total numbers, yeah. I had 2 squad leaders, my 2 squad leaders were there for quite a while. I had a platoon sergeant. When I got there, he was what we called a shake and bake. He went through NCO school. Graduated at the top of his class. He was an E6, and I think only the top 1 or 2%, whatever, of the NCO school came on E6. And he had actually been with the 5th Mech Division, which was north of us, in I Corps, and they had been sent home, and he didn't have enough time in, so he was sent to the 101st. So he was my first platoon sergeant. He was an excellent platoon sergeant, and he left. I guess in July, and then I got what's called a hard strike E6, and I got come through the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very, very fortunate, and I had 2 excellent platoon sergeants, and that goes a long way to helping to run a platoon.
All right. Now, your battalion gets involved or engaged in some of the stuff going on around Ripcord as things get more intense. So I guess we're kind of just sort of, in general, we're kind of following your time in Vietnam. So you're doing patrolling in and out of the Ripcord area operations for a while. Ripcord itself really starts to heat up in July when the actual base comes under siege and so forth. And what's your battalion doing around that time?
Well, we were in the Ripcord area. We were probably, get my directions correct here, a little south of Ripcord, I guess. And we had some significant contacts there. I remember at one point there was this huge mountain called Cock Muin. I'm trying to remember my direction. I think it was south of Ripcord.
Yeah, it's south and west.
South and west, yeah. I set up there. This was one time when we did stay in one spot for 2 days. I was attached to the recon platoon, battalion recon platoon. And we were up on Cock Muin for a couple of days. And we moved off, and we had a trail watcher following us, and one of my guys spotted him because the recon platoon, I think recon platoon was on the point we were following them. But decision was made that we'd go back and get this trail watcher, kill him, and they sent the recon platoon leader sent a sniper team back, and the guy was on a little, he was above us, a little ridge line, and I went back with them, and And he missed the kill. He hit the guy in the hip. And the problem was, again, I couldn't see up there to know what was up there. Because this guy was up there, he's moaning. He was hit. And I couldn't get a chopper out to recon that area for us. And so I don't know, is this guy by himself? Or does he have a squad up there that's now using him as bait? Because my instinct is, we'll go get the guy. Grab a medical, but I can't risk this, And we stayed there for, I don't know how long this man died. And that was a bitter feeling, just unable to do anything for this guy.
Wasn't staying there also kind of dangerous? I mean, there had been a gunshot, or was a sniper shot quiet?
Well, it could have been dangerous. I wasn't going to walk away from it, I guess.
Okay.
It could have been, but I just remember. So we set up that night, and my platoon would always put out booby traps, mechanical ambushes, where we just left. And we had a joint CP with the recon platoon leader, his CP and mine. And someone somewhere along the way thought he saw more trail watchers the way we come in. And I remember the sniper came into the CP and he wanted to go back out and try to get him this time. I guess, and this was getting toward dusk. And he wanted to go through my position, my part of the perimeter. And I, of course I knew it was out there, and I told him, you check with my people before you leave this perimeter, because we will have booby traps out there. And I think it went in one ear and out the other. And the next thing we heard were the claymores go off. And this sniper and his spotter, I found later, just blew right through the perimeter, right into the claymores. But by that time, it was almost dark. The spotter was killed instantly. The sniper was badly wounded. And by the time we got the medevac out there, it was dark. We brought him in with strobe lights. And he died on the way in. Our sniper, And I just, it was just a tough day. So not only do we have contact with the NBA and the battles there, but other things happen, And that movie that came out a year or two ago about the sniper in Iraq, there's no way in hell I'm going to go see a movie. There's just no way in hell I just am not going to deal with. Right now is maybe the fourth or fifth time I've talked to people about this thing. It's just a horrendous day. We left the guy up there dying, and then the guy here walks in the booby trap. Just miserable day. So in addition to sort of, again, bumping heads with the NBA around ripcord, these other things are going on, which is just difficult.
I think your battalion got involved in a couple of places around ripcord. I think
we did. We went on the 14th of July. We went after Hill 1000. The 506th had tried to go up with, I guess, get my map straight here. They tried to go up the west side of 1000 a couple weeks earlier, and I almost got to the top really, but couldn't stay there. We tried to go up the east side. we had gone back to resupply. This was after the incident with the sniper. We went back to Fubai for about a day and resupplied. Came back out, again landed up on Cockmune and moved down toward Hill 1000 and went after the second day. We moved out with recon platoon on the point, Bravo Company second in the movement, and hit a bunker complex on Hill 1000, and I saw the NVA open up with RPGs into the trees, so you get that spreading effect of the shrapnel. And pretty well chewed up the recon platoon. There was a guy who, I don't know his name, I think I might know him one time, lost his hand in that explosion down there. And it was amazing, in the middle of that firefight, I think he was in shock, but I think he was also lucid enough to know that he couldn't stay there because he was going to bleed to death.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching this guy. He got up and he walked down that firefight just as you'd walk to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread, and he was holding. And I mean, rounds were going everywhere, and he was unscathed after losing his hand. Mm-hmm. He walked right out of the battle. The damnedest thing he saw in my life. But we pulled back. We got recon out of there. We pulled back, brought in artillery. Brought in air power rather than artillery. Brought in the fast moves, the 105s, and they just bombed the hell out of those bunkers. I remember literally the ground shaking, and the concussion was knocking branches off trees or flopping down on us. One of my guys actually got cut in the face with tree bark that was flying around, and he was a good soldier, and he looked as white as those sheets, and I was trying to buck him up, and I remember I said, listen, George Paul, I'll put you in for a Purple Heart better day, kind of trying to joke with him about it. So the Jets finished their work, and we went after the bunkers again. This time Bravo was on the point here. The second platoon was leading us. My platoon was right behind Bravo. And they got to about the same point recon did, and once again RPG initiated the contact, and they got the same thing. They got many guys wounded, a lot of people fired up there. And I took my platoon down to relieve them, and we managed to get them out of there, and we withdrew. And I think we had over 20 guys wounded that day. But when I got back to the company position, I found that this guy that hit with that tree bark, and I told him I'd give him a Purple Heart, he was dead. He had apparently been helping evacuate some wounded guys onto medevacs, and apparently a stray round came out of nowhere and went right through him. Mm-hmm. And that was the last guy I lost there. He was the 8th guy I lost. And we set up that night, and I thought, well, we'll go again tomorrow. I really thought we would go again tomorrow, and I figured, well, okay, let's see. I think I know who's going to be on point tomorrow, right? And we didn't. We withdrew from Hill 1000. And as I think about ripcord and I think about that battle, and again, I'm not a great military tactician by any stretch, but I think that was a foreshadowing of leaving ripcord. I think Hill 1000 was, I think we had to have Hill 1000 if we were going to keep ripcord.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the MBA were just using it as a launching pad for a lot of stuff onto ripcord, and it was higher than ripcord. And I think in retrospect that was the foreshadowing of the withdrawal. This was the 14th, and we withdrew. I think this was 23rd of July. And yeah, we withdrew from that battle.
Did you come back to the ripcord AO before the evacuation, or were you now just in other places?
Went south and constructed a fire base called Brick. And really, that was where the ripcord was the last real significant contacts I had in Vietnam. The next several months, every once in a while something would happen, but it was not heavy duty.
Okay, this tape is about up, so we are going to pause here.
Good.
Take a break for a moment. All right, so we got to the point in your story. We talked about having left the ripcord AO, you no longer had a lot of intense activity in the remaining months in the field, but you had some larger comment about what you saw going on there.
Yeah, I think this was an army that was withdrawing. The only war left in Vietnam was I Corps. I'm pretty sure of that. And the only unit fighting in I Corps was 101st Airborne Division. And these guys knew it. I mean, you know, they might 19, 20 years old. Maybe they weren't the most sophisticated people in the world, but they knew that everyone else was leaving, and they were left to fight a war that the country was withdrawing from. And it was not easy duty for them. It was not. It was not a time filled with glory and all of those things. And as I think back about it, look back on, I think one of the things that really impresses me is what I think is overlooked a lot is the courage these guys had. I mean, it's easy to talk to me about the courage of the Army of 65, 66, 67. But by 1970, we tend to want to start thinking about the Army in Vietnam with drug problems and race issues and lack of discipline, and certainly that was there to one extent or another. It was not there in the field of ripcord, and it was not there when we went into battle, and there were guys there who didn't want to go, but their buddies go in and they're going to go with him. And there was a courage. There was a courage that these guys exhibited that I think has been undervalued. And it needs to be acknowledged. And so my point there is you know, this was not. These guys did what they had to do, and they tried to take care of themselves and each other as best they could. And it was a crappy mission. I think if ripcord had been 1968, the 101st would have piled on every asset it had and would have borrowed assets if it needed them, and we would have established ripcord and did what we had to do. But it was not 1968. It was 1970. The political situation was different. But the courage of these men was still there.
Yeah. One of the stereotypes is, and it's something that some people in higher levels of the command certainly thought by 1971 or so, was that the Army couldn't fight or was in crisis or whatever. But you still see here at this point, this is consistent with what I got from an awful lot of people who were there, was that the soldiers in the field would still fight. And they could still be effective. And part of it is because they had to be there to get out of there alive. But that could still function, and that most guys were still actually doing their jobs.
Yes. Yes.
Now, with officers, it's a standard thing to rotate them in different assignments. So what happened to you in your assignment? I mean, and you mentioned something about when you were supposed to rotate out and when you really did rotate
Yeah.
out. Talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
and how that worked.
Well, after Red Court, after July, I'd been there 4 months, and 4 months seemed to be the standard for an officer to serve in the field. And I recall we were in Fubai on a stand down, and I was told, I don't know that could. Sometime at the end of July, my company commander, Captain Stanton, left, and a captain named Joe Schwalzo replaced him, and someone came to me and said that they were looking for a rear job for me because I had completed my 4 months in the field, and again, there was 4 months with no replacements were coming through, and I simply remember asking who takes the platoon, because if nothing else, I'd like to meet my replacement and sort of orient him or whatever. And I was told they had no officers, that they would simply assign the task to the platoon sergeant, who was certainly, as I mentioned earlier, a very, very capable man, but he was not being paid to be a platoon leader. He was a platoon sergeant. Actually, he wasn't even a platoon sergeant, he was E6. Technically, he should have been a squad leader, but the Vietnam of the day, he was a platoon sergeant. And so I simply said, when you have a replacement, I'll leave the field, otherwise I'll stay with my platoon. And as it turns out, one of the things at least I did early on, I guess early on in my tour, is you get there, they ask you when do you want to go on R&R and where you want to go, and you get that paperwork out of the way. And my R&R was scheduled for after 7 months, and as it turns out, that's when they got a replacement platoon leader for me. So I had the platoon for 7 months. Went on R&R to Australia, came back, and found that I had been assigned to the battalion staff as the S2, the intelligence officer. And that was a strange job in a way. I remember first I don't think we generated that. I wasn't interrogating prisoners or any of that kind of stuff. It was just my job. I don't know that I really did it particularly well, because I didn't understand what they wanted of me, and no one was really very forthcoming with what I should have been doing. And I have, when officers would come, a brigade commander or the assistant division commander would come in, and at least one of them showed up every day for a briefing, because we were always on a forward fire base. And so we'd have a briefing for them, and it would always start with the S2 in terms of talking about any activity that happened in the last day or two, contacts or this, that, whatever, disposition of the units. And then the operations officer, S3, would talk about plans for the future, and then the battalion commander would sort of wrap things up, and whatever discussion ensued took place. And as a young second lieutenant, I was always quietly off to the side. But I will say that I have, well, I think I did my job as a platoon leader as best I could. I mean, there are things I certainly would change, but I never felt that I did a great job as the S2, because I never fully understood what I should have been doing. And I will say there have been times when I look back on that and I wonder about it. That's an area where I really should have tried to improve myself, but I'm not sure what I would have done.
You weren't getting guidance from battalion commander or XO or anybody else?
No, or even the brigade S2, and I tried to reach out to him a couple of times. I mean, no one said you're doing anything wrong. No one said, geez, you're the crappiest S2 I've ever seen in my life, but it just seemed to me that, I should be more that I was doing. I don't know. I did in that period, pardon me, probably in March of '71. No later than March, certainly. We had a combined operation with the 1st Army Division, and I was assigned to the 1st Army as a liaison officer with the battalion, which I found an interesting couple of weeks in the field with the Army. I mean, they operate totally in different ways than we did. They set up and build fires at night, and each officer had his own little bat boy who string his hammock for him, and everything it was going to war the Riviera style, if you will. They so I did do that, but the stint as the battalion intelligence officer, I just never really felt that I really got a good handle on that.
Okay. I want to jump back for a minute to the R&R in Australia. What was it like to go to Australia after having been in Vietnam all that time?
I had a meltdown. I learned, much years later in my life, I heard the term survivor's guilt, and I immediately understood it. I got to Sydney, and the first couple of days I did what any GI does in R&R, right? Find some booze, find a woman. And about the 3rd day, I just had this horrendous guilt feeling just crashing down on me, because here I was in a bar drinking and having fun and with women, and my platoon was back there in the monsoon now. This was October, it's a monsoon up there. And it's cold and it's wet, and it's and I literally drank the last half of my R&R, and that's all I did. Either in my room, or there was a bar on the ground floor of the hotel, and I would just go there, because I knew that I was going to go back to Vietnam and get killed, because I'd abandoned my platoon. Deserters get killed. And I must have heard in the jukebox in that bar, the boxer, Simon and Garfunkel. There was someone in that bar that played that song about 1,000 times a day. I remember drinking, being drunk as hell, and hearing the boxer, and that was my last couple of days of my R&R. I couldn't deal with it. I just really, so my R&R was done.
Did you have any impression of the Australians or how they treated the Americans there?
My first couple of days there, yeah, they were great to us. Which I would say really surprised me, because I thought, well, God, by this time they're going to be as sick of GIs as any army town around the United States, But they were very, very friendly, as near as I can remember. But I just couldn't handle it.
So it was almost a relief to go back to Vietnam at that point?
Except I really thought I was going to get killed.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's relief or not.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. I just know that it was a horrible time.
All right. Now, were you still there when the South Vietnamese conducted their operation in Laos?
Lam Song 719.
Yeah.
I was leaving as that was starting. Bravo Company had a big part in that, or it was 251 rather, had a big part in that, because apparently we used to provide a lot of security up to the border. And I would think that the Bravo S2 probably had a lot to do at that point, but it wasn't me,
All right. So you're on your way out.
I was on my way out, yeah.
Okay. Now, how do they get you out of Vietnam, or what's the process? Your runs out. Do you just wait for orders, or?
Well, actually, what happened was, I was sent back to Phu Bai to process out, and everyone knows his D-Ros, right? day I'm gonna leave. And I didn't get any orders. And I waited another day and there were no orders. And finally I went to battalion and so someone says, you're not supposed to leave for 2 weeks. And because you got here in March of whatever, you know. And I said, yeah, but I went to Panama and that counts as 2 weeks of overseas duty. Oh, really? Don't worry, sir, we'll have orders for you this afternoon. And they did. I mean, they did. I mean, they come. But if I hadn't walked in there, they didn't realize I had 2 weeks in Panama first, and that was supposed to count as part of the overseas duty. So yeah, so that's, you know, I sort of got myself out of there in a sense.
Okay. All right.
Went to Da Nang and flew to Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay. Now, did you still have time left to serve on your enlistment, or were you done?
That was it.
Okay.
ROTC was 2 years active duty commitment, and
I guess you had trained long enough before you got to Vietnam, but that...
yeah, that at the time at Fort Leonard Wood. My active duty was on my DD 214 is a year, 11 months, and like 15 days. So I got 2 weeks of vacation paid for the.
All right. Now, did the Army make any effort to encourage you to stay in?
Yeah, they. I was informally officers in Vietnam. Probably the one that impressed me the most was my company first sergeant wanted me to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think anytime an NCO says to a lieutenant, you know, you give that consideration. I mean, you know, because I respected the hell out of him, and the fact that he thought I should stay in the Army meant a lot to me. Mm-hmm. My last company commander wanted me to, and there were a couple of other guys. I had a long talk with an officer. Long talk. I had a talk with a. He was a West Pointer. I can't remember his name. He'd been with a mech unit somewhere in the South, and they went home, and he came up to the 101st. And I remember I had a discussion with him one time, because he was in for the long haul. He wanted a career in the Army, and he was the guy that thought I should stay. And I said, well, why do this? Because the Army was a mess then. I mean, it was getting to be a mess. And I was so impressed with his answer. He told me, he said, look, that's, anyone can be an officer going as easy. He said, now is when the Army needs us. Mm-hmm. You know. And I was impressed with his, he was going to stay in. I couldn't do it. It wasn't in me, but I admired him because he was, he knew it was going to be tough. He knew it was a bad Army at that time, but he also knew that the bad Army needed good officers, and he was going to ride it out. And I admired that in him. But it just wasn't in me to be a career officer.
So what have you seen at that point that led you to think it was a bad Army?
Well, because of the stuff that's going on in the rear with the drug issues and that kind of stuff, the racial issues. I wasn't in the rear that much, but I knew of it.
Right.
And I knew those problems were there. And it was also an Army that was that the country didn't give a damn about at that point either. I mean, I don't think there was anything easy about the Army in the 70s.
Yeah.
But this guy was sticking it out. I think people like that deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you come back now. What do you do once you get out?
Initially, I had another one of those. I was released from Fort Lewis, and there must have been a group of 20 or so of us, and we were taken to a bus station on post, and there was a ticket booth to Seattle Tacoma International, and there was a ticket booth to the city of Seattle, and it was this mad dash for the airport. And I remember standing there and looking at the two of them, and realizing I couldn't go home. I wasn't ready to. I needed to process a lot of this stuff. So I went to Seattle. I got a room in a YMCA, and a bed, and a laboratory. It was like a two-floor room. The showers and the toilets and everything down the hall. And I stayed in Seattle for about a week. And I just walked the streets, get in the morning, go up, get some coffee, read a newspaper, walk, just get it back, you know. I mean, you think about it, they, you know, even the guy who's drafted gets basic and AIT, he gets trained to go, you get nothing to come back, you know. And I think that, you know, that's one of the feelings that I look back on the military time. I think that's one of the failings of the Army. You know, I was in an airplane for 12 hours or so. We didn't need 12 hours of orientation to come back, but there could have been something. You know, I knew if I went home, I wouldn't be able to handle it right away. You know, my mom would be, oh, good to see you, and, you know, the family and all that. Not that I didn't want to see, I just wasn't ready. I knew it. I remember walking into a little mom and pop place one night, you know, linoleum floor type place for dinner, and I'm sitting at the table, and there's a couple over there, and they get up to leave, and I remember the guy reaches in his pocket and leaves change on the table and walks away, and I'm not kidding you 1 second, it took me 2 or 3 minutes to remember tip. I couldn't remember, why the hell's this guy walking away and leaving that money? You know, finally I got it back. So you know, there was nothing that was planned. It's just when I hit that spot, I just, you know, this way or that way, and just something in my gut just said, you don't go home right now. You know, you got to sort this out. So then I went home, and I was still, you know, trying to adjust to the world, I guess. I was in the States for 3 months, and I packed a rucksack and went to Europe, and I spent 7 months hitchhiking through Europe. Just, again, processing. Came back from Europe. One of the things that happened back in the late 60s at Ohio University, I had a degree in business administration, but I knew I really didn't want to. I was cut off from the corporate world, and I think a lot of that social upheaval at the time in the 60s, I got really interested in that, what's going on there, how does the nation deal with it? Well, the short is that it led me to a career in urban planning then. So I came back, after I came back from Europe, I went to the University of Akron and got a degree in urban planning, and went to work for a 5-county regional transportation planning organization in the Cleveland area. And I think the thing that mostly interested me in business, I know in the business curriculum, was economics. The thing that interested me a lot in going through planning programs was urban economics. So I gravitated into a lot of work in urban economics. I ended up getting a second master's degree in econ, and I worked. So I worked 32 years there in the field of urban economics. A lot of analysis, a lot of demographic work also. Which I found I enjoyed, I really did. It was very, very interesting work. I never had this sense, I never went to work a day in my life. Never got up and said, oh, damn, you know, I enjoyed it, you know. And I think I was extremely fortunate in that regard.
All right. Now, to look back at the time that you spent in the Army, how do you think that affected you overall, positive, negatively?
Well, I think there's no question it was a positive. I mean, I'm sure there's some negatives here and there. I think people, we should serve our country. First of all, just flat ass, we should serve our country. I think, and again, in a sense, I served my country in Vietnam. I feel I served my country in a career in public planning. I'm now retired. I serve my country 2 days a week with Habitat for Humanity, building houses for people. I don't see anything wrong with a life spent like that. I have nothing against, you know, the guy that took the degree in finance and went to work for Merrill Lynch and made his millions. That's part of us also, you know. But this was my way. I think had I, well, I never would have avoided service. I never would have gone to Canada. I know that. But let's say I had a bum knee from football or something like that. Was medically ineligible for service. I think that would have bothered me a lot. My father served in World War II. All of my uncles served in World War II. I sort of, and frankly, had there not been a war, I would have been in the Army. I mean, I would have gone in the military, because that I sort of, I mean, you know, we didn't, you know, it was a big flag waving in my home or anything like that, but I knew they were all there. And I would have been in the military war or not. So I look back on, and I look back with pride on my military time. I do.
All right. Well, it makes for a good story, so thank you very much for taking the time to share it today.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to leave on with this.